I've already talked about the institutional need for plurality. Institutional, I emphasize. But perhaps I can try to say something on the role of behavioral norms and ethics and the need for plurality there. Oddly enough, it's often repeated these days that Adam Smith championed the view that the pursuit of self-interest is the best way for people to build a good society, thanks to something called the invisible hand, to which Smith had made only a couple of passing references. And one of them is in the form of ridiculing it, referring it to calling it bloody and invisible hand, referring to Lady Macbeth. So I think it's a peculiar that basically one single reference has created an image of Smith. And then actually, if I may go off the text, there's a passage which 13 lines which of Smith, which everyone seems to read. This is about the butcher and the baker and the brewer. All it says that they need not be altruists in order to seek trade. Well, certainly true. But that's not where Smith's analysis stops. He then says, well, seeking of trade is one thing. What makes trade efficient? What makes it stable? And trading is only one thing. There is production. And then certainly you need cooperation, not of the kind of self-seeking, but also a sense of duty and a sense of social activity. And then there's the issue of distribution, which engaged Smith so much. So it's peculiar, though those 13 lines have become the dominant. You go in some universities, like in Chicago, you get the impression. When I first visited Chicago in 1960, I was just amazed that everyone knew Smith, which meant 13 lines of Smith and almost nothing else. The idea that Smith assumed human beings are basically self-centered and that this is what society needs, both that human beings are self-centered and second, that's what society needs. Both these are really preposterous when attributed to Smith. Those silly ideas were definitely not Smith's, and indeed, you don't have to read far. The Theory of Moral Sentiment, the first sentence, chapter 1, page 1, sentence 1, reads this. I quote Smith. Howsoever selfish man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortunes of others and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it. Unquote. So my complaint is that it's not that they don't read far enough into the Smith, but this is the first sentence of the book. And you shouldn't, if you get bored with the book before the first sentence, that's really quite a serious problem. Smith distinguishes with great sophistication the different kinds of reasons people have in taking an interest in the lives of others, separating out very carefully sympathy, generosity, public spirit, and other non-self-interested motivations. He discusses how reasoning, which is at the heart of rationality, has a big role in preventing us from being consciously self-centered or unconsciously uncaring. Smith discusses the need for ethics in great detail and introduces the innovative concept of an quote-unquote impartial spectator as someone whom you ask what would it look like to a person who is far away outside and comes and looks at this, what would it appear to an impartial spectator? And the idea is to get a picture which is not colored by your vested interest, but take the outlook of an imagined impartial spectator. As Smith puts it, I quote now from Smith, we can never survey our own sentiments and motives, we can never form any judgment concerning them unless we remove ourselves, as it were, from our own natural station and endeavor to view them as at a certain distance from us. But we can do this in no other way than by endeavoring to view them with the eyes of other people, or as other people are likely to view them, unquote. Does this kind of broadening exercise help in building a good society, including a well-functioning market economy? Smith argues not only for institutional multiplicity, but also for motivational plurality, rather than relying only on the pursuit of self-interest or even only on prudence. Indeed, he goes on to argue that while, I quote, prudence was of all virtues that which is most helpful to the individual, humanity, justice, generosity, and public spirit are the qualities most useful to others, unquote. Even though our reasons for seeking trade may be closely related to our understanding of our own interest, that's the butcher, baker, brewer, the working of a society goes much beyond the motivations for seeking trade, and even the successful operation of a market economy demands more than what Smith called self-love. Policymakers have two distinct but interrelated reasons for taking an interest in the ideas of social justice. The first and the more direct reason for policymakers and public administrators is that justice is a crucially relevant concept in identifying the aims and objectives of public policy, and also in deciding on the instruments that are appropriate in pursuing the chosen end. This is the analytical, informational role of the public administrators in making politics and political discussion more informed, because this is what I think in the English context is called the briefs that are produced by public administrators. It is the way the debate is framed. Concepts of justice are crucially relevant for cogent analysis and reasoned selection of ends and means of public policy. The second, more indirect reason is that all public policies are dependent on how individuals and groups in the society behave. And their behavior, the behavior of the people involved in the society, is influenced inter alia by their own understanding and interpretation of the demands of justice. For the making of public policy, it is important not only to assess the demands of justice and the reach of values in choosing the objects and conditionalities and goals of public policy, but also to understand the importance of the values and concepts of justice in the behavior of the general public. The nature of the present economic crisis illustrates very clearly the need for departure from unmitigated and unrestrained self-seeking in order to have a decent society. Even John McCain, the Republican presidential candidate in the United States, complained constantly in the summer of 2008 while fighting the election, complained constantly of, quote-unquote, the greed of Wall Street. Indeed, there is much evidence that has emerged powerfully in recent years in that direction, in order to, in addition to what we already knew from past studies of the adversity of motivational narrowness. Successful market economies demand on a variety of values, including mutual trust and confidence. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith illustrates his point with various examples, and I take one which is quite relevant for the credit problems in the contemporary world. I quote from Smith: "When the people of any particular country has such confidence in the fortune, probity, and prudence of a particular banker as to believe he is always ready to pay upon demand such of his promissory notes as are likely to be at any time presented to him, those notes come to have the same currency as gold and silver money, for the confidence that such money can at any time be had for them." So why mutual trust is extremely important to regenerate a credit market today, or to sustain credit market.